Welcome everyone to another episode of Reflections on Health podcast. Today I am with Nathan Siles. Now Nathan Siles is an expert in biophysics and mitochondrial health. Nathan, I guess my first question for you is, what is biophysics and mitochondrial health?
Jackie, great to be here. Thanks so much. And a really cool intro, because biophysics and mitochondrial health, I'm biased. I love this area, but it's actually the foundation of health. And it's all of the context in which you live in that actually signals either health or disease. So the biophysics, meaning the actual physics of the body, of life itself, at a very quantum scale, subatomic, very micro scale. And once we can understand the movements of energy and information and substance and substrates at that very, very deep subatomic level, then we can actually start to, it's ultra reductionist, then we can start to understand how the more macro expressions of life start to form. And the most basic biophysics understanding is, imagine you're looking through an electron microscope and you're zooming right into every single thing that you see and experience right now. You can find energy at the root. There's no solid matter. It's all energy. And within the energy, there's information. And this energy and information dance at this deep level is what forms the actual energetic ether foundation of everything, connecting everything together. And then when we look at a bit more of a macro expression, the first layer of really important sort of culminations and symbiosis of the way life brings itself together is at the mitochondrial level. And these mitochondria are organelles, and they float around in the cytosol, in the water, and they move and they transport energy and they build water and they signal and they release light and they use electricity and they do all these beautiful, beautiful things that allow your DNA to be expressed, your proteins to be built, your body to have energy and life, and for you to be able to do all the things that you are able to do, especially all the unconscious things. So the analogy I like to give is, this is so important, because what is the difference between a live body and a dead body? Well, they have the same biochemistry. There's still, all those different, magnesium, iron, zinc, potassium, there's proteins, there's keratin, there's all these different things. They're all the same. One has energy and one doesn't. And the mitochondria make the energy. So this animates life, and it makes energy through a biophysical process. So when you understand the biophysics, the process in which we make energy and use information, into mitochondria, which is how we then transport that into our life and plants and animals and everything, then you can start to understand the context in which we have to move and exercise, or where we should be eating, or when we should be having conversations with friends, or what we should do for work, or where we should spend our time. And all of those things are dictated by either optimizing your biology or going against what nature built into us. And that's where we start to see more degeneration and illness. But if we focus on being in alignment with our inner nature, and we represent that by connecting with the outer nature of how we were built at the deepest foundational level, then health will naturally express itself. So that's where I find my foundational passion of this area.
I love that. I think there's so much in that, and there's so much to unpack, and a lot of questions I want to ask. A lot of medicine, I suppose, these days is based on biology, and you never hear anything about biophysics and looking at the actual physics that I guess is a smaller level to looking at the molecules and things of the body. We're zooming in even deeper to biophysics. Is that kind of a basic summary, a difference, I guess?
Yeah, it is. And it absolutely is, Jackie, because the chemistry follows the physics. So the physics is the deepest layer. So when we talk about biochemistry or even biology, what we've done in centralized medicine is we've distributed the body into anatomy and we've separated it. So we've stopped looking at it as a beautiful integrated connective system that has purpose and has a unified purpose. So the greatest way to understand this is cancer, and that's something I'm very familiar with. And when you have parts of the body that are working for a different informational process, they're doing something differently and they're processing energy differently, they're no longer part of the collective. And this is something that, you know, it's not isolated to a particular part of the body. It's the whole system that needs to start to signal again. So the biophysics layer actually informs the biochemistry. And what's really powerful is that what controls the biophysics is actually what touches your surfaces. So your eyes, your skin, your gut and your lungs, your aerodigestive tract, those four surfaces control all of your biochemistry underneath. So you can control your biochemistry by putting in supplements or drugs or substrates or food or water. You can control it through intention, through meditation, through introspection, through inner work. You can absolutely do that. But if you have the biophysics touching those four surfaces, working against it, you are absolutely pushing stones up a hill. And this is where we're in this world where we can no longer out-eat or out-exercise our environment and our lifestyle. We have to create a healthy biophysical lifestyle and biophysical environment in the spaces in which we exist in order to inform all of our biochemistry and therefore our systems level biology. So there is no shortcut to health. There is a total health solution that involves the deepest layer of biophysics. And there's so many different aspects, and you know, the science is thermodynamics and the laws there and entropy and all these different things that inform the biophysics, but the actual solutions are quite straightforward. They're not easy to implement in this modern world, but they're straightforward. And you know, it took me 8 years of deep scientific research and chasing masters all over the world to figure this out, the language of the body and the language of nature. But once you get it and you have that framework, you're able to see the biochemical cascades that methylate DNA or acetylate DNA or build up proteins and fold them correctly or fold them incorrectly, or why the fascia is dehydrated. All these things you can start to see why they're happening at a biophysical layer.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. I love that. Can we go back a step? You talked about cancer, and I just want to go back to how you got into biophysics. What sort of inspired you to start this journey, and where did you kind of start from?
Yeah, Jackie, cool. When I was 8 months old, I was diagnosed with retinoblastoma, which means cancer on my retinas of my eyes. So I had about 20 tumors on each eye. I was a little bub crawling on the ground, and you know, bam, my mom noticed that my eyes were diverting off center and there were tumors growing. And I went to my ophthalmologist and I started my 30 days of radiation treatment to stop the spread and try to save my eyes and save my life. And obviously there's a lot of complicated processes that go into that. I won't go into too much detail, but they knock you unconscious, put you in the radiation machine, shoot X-ray radiation through your temples, and then aim it directly at the cancer, hoping not to hit other parts of the brain, and hoping that the cancer will respond and the system won't be destroyed. So luckily enough, I was able to get through that, and they were almost amputating an eye, but they managed to increase the radiation dose, so they got rid of it, and it was quite effective. So I have scar tissue on both of my eyes. About 90% of my eyes are scarred on the retina, which is the area of the eye that takes in the light and takes in the information and energy signals. So naturally, you would think I'm already, you know, a little bit down in terms of energy and information precision signaling through that brain, that first and most important surface pathway. So you would imagine, you know, challenges later in life. So as you would expect, some growing difficulties, some hormonal difficulties early in life. Cataracts developed at age 9, and they started getting thicker and thicker. I got a cataract taken out of the left eye, intraocular lens put in. That lens now filters a huge amount of light, so it's similar to the cataract from a biophysics perspective, which is not great. And then I went through quite a successful early career in finance. And then as things were going great, 24, I was a soccer player and a swimmer. I was about to go training for the Paralympic swimming team. My mom was very naturally health focused. I was eating beautifully organic food, lots of mixed vegetables and meats and seafood and things like that. And I was taking supplements, and I was exercising. I was swimming in early mornings. I was doing some gym work. I was, 80 kilos, 6'2", healthy as I could be, I thought, pasty white skin. And, I wasn't sleeping great. But besides that, I thought I was doing well. And then at 24, I got diagnosed with testicular cancer. So that was a slap in the face, or should I say a punch in the face. And for me, it was something I had to decide to take action on straight away. So my athlete mindset kicked in and said, let's get this out. It's a battle. Let's fight it. So surgery within 24 hours of diagnosis. They found it had spread. So I started chemotherapy for 3 months. And then that went through, and my eyelashes fell out, my hair fell out, and the nausea was unbearable. And I realized that I knew nothing about health. And it wasn't diet and exercise. It wasn't supplements. It wasn't what I'd been told. And my naturopath passed me a podcast from Dr. Jack Cruz. And Dr. Jack Cruz, for those who don't know, is a neurosurgeon based out of the US, now El Salvador. And he's a brilliant man, a genius in my eyes. And he's able to connect dots that I've never seen anyone do, with a brilliant brain. And he was teaching a podcast on the biophysics of cancer. It was the first time I'd heard the word, and I didn't know what it was. And I was researching at the same time The Truth About Cancer by Ty Bollinger. So, CBD and, nicotine and, other nutraceuticals and, other things that could help in apricot kernels and all these types of things. So I was doing all of that. And I was taking some of these things wherever I could. And then I was learning the biophysics along the side. And I couldn't understand what Jack was talking about in these first few podcasts, but I knew it was very important, the way he presented it. So I took 1.5 years off work as I was recovering from my chemo. I was in remission. Everything was great. I started implementing protocols around sunlight, around grounding, around spending time at the beach, around doing cold thermogenesis, around doing sauna, and using a lot of these different protocols, controlling my environment and controlling my biochemistry through the biophysics. Optimizing my sleep. I got rid of all artificial light in the blue range after sunset, out of my life, gone. I cleared out all the electromagnetic fields out of my bedroom. So I was sleeping in an absolute dead zone. It was like going into space. It was amazing. And I spent a lot of money on doing that. And that's when I started healing. That's when I started sleeping. I didn't wake up. I would go to sleep and my eyes would open and it'd be the morning time. And this is when I started realizing, wow, okay, I'm no longer eating after sunset. I'm getting these environmental signals. I've gotten rid of all the chemical toxins, EMF toxins, and artificial light. And I'm now adding in energy into the system through nature. And I'm starting to feel amazing. So I tracked my markers, I tracked my bloods, I did all these things, and I got rid of my oncologist. I didn't go back for the 5-year checkup because I didn't want to be a statistic that said the chemotherapy worked. So I never got into that book, and I started managing my own cancer journey by myself, measuring my markers and everything. So that took me all around the world, and I realized I was onto something. And I joined communities. I started meeting people. I moved to Cairns, then I moved to Mexico. Then I moved to, I went and traveled to Iceland. I traveled all over. And I met Alexander Wunsch, a photoendocrinologist in Germany. I worked on a few projects with Dr. Gerald Pollack, who's a good friend. He's a water biophysicist out of Seattle, Washington. And then I had some emails and exchanges with a lot of these world experts in the optics, physics, mitochondrial space, Doug Wallace, these types of guys. And that's when I started realizing I have to teach this. I have to help people. And I did it for free to begin with. And I started helping people and it was working. They had cancer, they had autism, they had dementia, they had Parkinson's, they had rheumatoid arthritis, they had all these different things. And I found the same fundamental principles targeting the biophysics of mitochondria seemed to help all of them. And it wasn't the solution for everyone to get back to completely healthy, but it was absolutely foundational to allow the therapies and things that they were using to actually take hold and work properly. So it was the ultimate complementary therapy to everything. So that's when my markers were so exceptional from a biophysics standpoint that my vitamin D was at 340, which is 2 or 3 times above the range. My testosterone was at 1,200 for a period of time, so 3 times above the range with one testy. And all these things I proved to myself that I could do in my own body, especially with the terrible head start that I had and the scarred retinas, still inability to capture that light. I was still able to produce these types of thriving biochemical signals in my body. And so then I got results with patients. I work with now over 1,000 patients and been able to see some very incredible transformations in diseases you would very little expect to see these transformations, including some that Western medicine has no answer for and says, we don't know, good luck, you're on steroids forever. So that sort of brought me to where I am now, and the passion projects that I've started, now turning them into companies and trying to help on a global scale.
Yeah, that's such a fascinating story. That's really inspiring. I love your starting point and your journey and how you've discovered all of this and it's worked for you, and now you're sort of sharing that with other people as well, and really just building and building and building on that. That's really good. Yeah, I read a book not long ago by Casey Means, and I think there was a few of the strategies in that you talked about. Meal timing and getting outside, and even it got me reflecting on every time I go camping, I sleep so much better. Like just being outside and not having all of that computer and lights and everything else around. And we're so disconnected from that these days. We're not even walking on the ground these days. We're in buildings or wearing shoes or
And that, Jackie, that disconnection, just for 1 second, is the disconnection from our inner nature to the outer nature around us. We're in the built environment and we've migrated indoors most of our lives now. And that disharmony is the foundation of health and disease. So we have to get back to a relationship where we respect where we've come from. And if we want to adapt in a way where we are resilient to breaking nature's rules, we need to build up enough energy and information that's coherent in our system so that we're able to endure these long-haul plane flights or long days at the office or long drives to commute places. So that is a celebration of having a powerful internal nature at a deep biophysical level. And so that's where we start to get shortchanged when we start to try and cheat nature a little bit too much. So we're very smart. We have these brains and we can do anything with our brains. We can break nature's rules. We can break gravity. We can build inventions like planes, but it doesn't mean that there's not a biological cost to that if you introduce those changes too quickly. And it doesn't mean that we can't adapt to somewhat of an indoor existence positively, because our body will find extra strength to be able to adapt to that through hormesis. And it will create new DNA mutations to allow us to be able to do that. But it takes generations. It takes a long time. And unfortunately, what we found in this short 30 years or so is we've gone from 0G to 5G. We've gone from 50% outdoors to 7% outdoors. And we're seeing the biological toll and the epidemics of ADHD and autism and Parkinson's and cancer, and the list goes on.
It's huge. And modern medicine doesn't have a lot of answers for a lot of these health conditions. It's sort of, there might be strategies to manage it a little bit, but no sort of answers for the people that are kind of suffering with that. Can we talk through some of the strategies that you use, and then how do they work?
Yeah, brilliant. So there's a lot to tuck into there. I would say the best way to understand this is to demystify a little bit of these fields. So number one is When you migrate from the full spectrum of sunlight to a narrow spectrum of LEDs and technology screens, and at the same time, you put up windows that have low E glass and they filter out a lot of light. What you've done is you've just gotten rid of about 60 to 70% of the full solar spectrum. Now, we are solar beings, we're photosynthetic beings, just like plants are, meaning we turn light into electrical signals, which then powers our internal photoelectric system, semiconductive, hydrated protein, carbon-based electrical system. And in that system, we then express all the things we need to if we're given that full, beautiful complement of 7 colors of the rainbow, infrared and ultraviolet. When we cut out the ultraviolet and you cut out the infrared and you narrow those 7 colors of the rainbow, we start to see disease. And what we've seen in recent times over the last 20 years or so is industries called phototherapy or photobiomodulation. And these are industries that are using ultraviolet light to get rid of jaundice and rickets, which isn't around anymore, but there's still similar things. It's psoriasis, it's rosacea, it's these types of things that ultraviolet light therapy is very strongly used for. And infrared light therapy is used for cancer, it's used for diabetes, it's used for glucose management, it's used for a lot of different conditions, osteoporosis, it's used in a lot of different ways. And we're starting to see that when you reintroduce the full spectrum into someone's life, these therapies no longer work so well. So when you add in a saunas are mostly infrared light. That is a stress on the system. That is a portion of light that we've missed. So if you look and examine your own life and you don't see the full spectrum of sun for 12 to 14 hours a day, sauna and red light therapy will help you. If you're afraid of UV light and you think that it gives you skin cancer, which is wrong, and I'll explain why if you'd like, UV light, then your psoriasis will go haywire and your autoimmunity will go through the roof. So you may see benefit from using ultraviolet therapy. Now, the interesting thing about light is that infrared light is the foundation of all light, which means any light that you ever use in your whole life needs to have at least 50% infrared. That's your TV screen, that's your phone, that's your LEDs, that's any light that you can see in your life needs to have 50% infrared, otherwise you're doing it wrong. Then you've got the 7 colors of the rainbow, and unfortunately what we see these days is the high energy visible light, the blue and the purple types of light, will actually tell your brain it's daytime. They will say it's time to secrete digestive enzymes and cortisol and raise your blood glucose and boost your dopamine and boost your epinephrine and all these things. You don't want to do that when you're sleeping. You never want to do that while you're trying to sleep or trying to wind down at the end of the day. So the modern world has built that in to a terrible habit of our environment and our lifestyle. And the UV side, the reason it doesn't cause skin cancer, and you may think it's, if you read the literature, they say UVA is associated with skin cancer. But if you look at the way that vitamin D is generated through UVB, it can't be UVB that causes cancer because vitamin D is anti-cancer. So that wipes UVB off the table. But UVA, it generates melatonin and it generates nitric oxide. And melatonin and nitric oxide act on the mitochondria to ensure that apoptosis works. Apoptosis is programmed cell death, meaning the cancer cell can take itself out. That's the one thing the cancer cell can't do. So UVB and UVA cannot be responsible solely for cancer because they have anti-cancer biophysical properties in the body. That's just a simple way to put it. So then why does it cause issues? Because a lot of the time, the UV is given without the infrared. And this is where all the studies that point to ultraviolet light being linked to DNA damage and RNA damage and skin cancers and things comes from. It comes from lab-used ultraviolet lights shone onto people who have very little melanin and very little photoprotective properties in their skin and their eyes, and it's never accompanied by infrared light. And so therefore you'll see problems. You will always see challenges when you don't accompany that. And that breaks the rule of nature, because you will never find a study that will show that sunlight itself, the more exposure you get, the more cancer you get. You will not find that. And the reason is because if the sun caused cancer, none of us would be here. The sun's been here for 4.6 billion years. Humans have been here for however long, whatever you believe, 2,000, 10,000, or 2 million, or 7 million, whatever we believe. I believe it's around there. We would all be dead. We would all have cataracts. We would all have skin cancers all over us, because we never invented sunscreen before 1936. We didn't have sunglasses before 1940, widely distributed. We didn't have slip, slop, slap. We didn't have indoor living. Everyone was connected to nature all the time, outside for most of human existence. And that was the biggest randomized clinical trial you could ever imagine. And yet people want to ignore that and relegate it to some experts, hashtag experts, who we relegate to a lab that does the testing for us. So to get back to the strategies, the things that work with all of that context in mind, the most important thing you can possibly do for yourself from a biophysical level is watch the sunrise every day. If you see, we have around 26,000 sunrises in our lives. And if you can see half of those, the odds are that you will never develop a chronic disease. So this is something that I'll put my hat on, and I'll say, if you commit to this, you are in such an amazing category that and look, to give you an understanding, I probably saw 3 or 4 sunrises my whole life until I was 24, and they were because I stayed up all night. So if you look back at your life and you look at how many sunrises you've actually seen, and you don't have to see it directly, just get up at sunrise, step outside, face east, and look up to the horizon or look up to the sky. That counts. If you do that for 15 to 20 minutes every single morning, you will lower your risk of all-cause mortality. So that's number one. Number two is you want no light after sunset. So this is where ideally we should all be turning all our lights off, and within an hour of dusk, as soon as that light goes away, within an hour we should all be asleep. Modern world doesn't happen. We can use firelight. We've evolved now over the last 2 million years with firelight. So we can break nature's rules a little bit to use red and infrared light after sunset. So use those incandescent bulbs, put on a red and infrared light panel. Ideally, you want to make it dim. So it needs to be dim, but it's that red and infrared spectrum. The next thing you can do is do not eat when the sun is not shining. Food is light and water in storage, right? So let me explain that. So food grows via photosynthesis. It takes the light through the leaves. It takes the water through the roots. It turns that into the fruit or the vegetable. We then eat that. We then unpack the light and water that's stored in those electrons and in those protons within all the food. And that goes and unleashes that light into our biology, turns it into electricity, and runs our mitochondria. So when you're eating light, you want to always be seeing light. So if we're eating light and it's dark, you're causing inflammation, you're causing sleep issues, you're causing a dysfunction of your circadian biology, because that gut surface is now saying it's daytime, your eyes and skin and your aerodigestive tract are saying it's, your lungs are saying it's nighttime, and you have incoherence, you have inflammation. So eating during daylight hours, and if you have anorexia or you have bulimia, or you have one of those very extreme conditions, yes, you can eat towards that evening part of the day. So you can have lunch and you can have dinner and you can skip breakfast. They're the only cases I ever give for skipping breakfast, because they're the people who want to put on weight. Most people do not want to put on extra visceral or adipose fat. If you don't want to put on visceral adipose fat, you eat breakfast within the first 30 minutes of waking up, seeing that sunrise. Always. Ideally 30 minutes. If you can't do that, do an hour. And it needs to be minimum of 25 grams of protein, ideally 50 grams of bioavailable, mostly ideally animal-based, unfortunately, protein for the vegans out there. This is what we've seen in a protein shake, a pea protein shake, or a whey protein shake. It unfortunately doesn't have the same trigger on the leptin and the ghrelin and the circadian system as if you're eating some nice pastured eggs with a couple breakfast sausages without preservatives, or a couple pieces of pork belly or bacon, or the dinner from the night before, a steak or some meatballs or some fish, some oysters, some salmon, some shrimp, whatever it is, something like that. Just dinner for breakfast. That's something I'm really trying to start, dinner for breakfast. And even more so, if you need to eat carbs, if you need to eat sugars, if you need to eat any processed things, because you got to just, that's part of what you are here for. You want to experience the full spectrum of life and all the flavors and tastes. Eat them for breakfast. Eat them in the morning. Your mitochondria are the most resilient in the morning. Also, you are the most insulin sensitive in the morning. So you can take a bit of a beating in the morning. And when you get towards the end of the day, this is when you want to try and take the digestive stress off the system. No light in the belly, no light on the eyes, no light on the skin. Rejuvenate, relax, and wind down for bed. If you follow just those three things, sunlight in the morning, eat breakfast, try and spend some time outside, sunset, blue blockers go on after dusk, after you see that last bit of blue light, blue hue from the sky, turn on your red incandescent fire and wind down to go to sleep. They are the foundations that will support your biology and biochemistry to keep you far away from disease.
Perfect. Like you said, that they're really simple, straightforward strategies. I find it's always the simple strategies, but the consistent implementation of those simple strategies makes the biggest difference. We tend to love overcomplicating things or want some really complex answer to, what we think are complex questions. But often it is just this simple. But it can be hard to implement consistently. Put this into somebody's lifestyle, into their work, into their habits already. There can be challenges.
And that's where the nuance comes in, and that's where the real circadian practitioner and biophysical mitochondrial practitioner comes in, where we get context of your life. And you can do this yourself, like feel this as plan your day out, write it out and say, can I fit that 20 minutes for sunrise in the morning? Can I then go out and eat my lunch outside? Can I, at my office desk, can I add some infrared light to my environment? Can I change my bulbs? Can I use Iris, a software on the computer screen? Can I open a window just to crack and change the entire light spectrum in the whole room? Can I then, take my breaks outside and touch the earth for a small period of time, even if it's 5 minutes? And then can I shift my evening routine where suddenly, it was this rowdy, everyone's home and we're all loving to spend time around dinner and cooking, and it's this whole happiness thing. Change that and shift that happiness to surrounding around a sauna or a fire, or play a board game under some red or amber light, or just shift some patterns so you're still connecting. You do never want to take away human connection or animal connection with animals. Still find a way to do that, but find a way to find some harmony that you can do that. If you can only relegate the red light to an hour before bedtime, that's awesome still. If you can do it straight after dusk, perfect. But if you can just do it for that little bit, great. So find out where you're at, plan your day out, see how many of these little nature chunks you can fit into your schedule. Because as Jackie said, the consistency will build resilience in your system. And that's really the art of all of this. Nothing is a mystery here. It's how do you stack these habits? How do you create it as a part of your life so that when you get to a stage like myself, I don't even think about health. I really don't think about my healthy day. I just know this is what I eat. This is where I hang out. I never work indoors for the whole day. I take 20-minute breaks every 3 hours to go and touch the earth, see the sun. I've got my tan through shorts on, when I'm outside in the day. It's just normal. And once you create that normalcy around it, that's where you start to go, oh, well, I guess I don't need my vitamin C supplement or my magnesium, or I don't need to go travel and do those stem cells, or, I don't need to, I've gotten rid of, I haven't bought a box of tissues in probably 9 years. I mean, you know, my nose is just never blocked anymore. It's never ever, you know, and flu season is not a thing. So you can create that, you can build that into your routine, into your lifestyle, and you'll find just so many benefits.
And I think listening to something like this is so important, because sometimes we can think, oh, these little things are not going to do anything, like what's going outside for 5 minutes going to do, and we can sort of be a bit dismissive of these little changes that really add up and make such a huge difference.
Yeah, the science is complex, but the strategies are easy. And like I said, you know, I can explain to you what every single nanometer of light that we know of does to the biology within our living system. I can explain all that. I can explain the full frequency of sound and what chemical reactions come off that. I can explain exactly what's happening when you touch the earth from a electromagnetic perspective, what's happening in the body, the ion exchange. I can explain all those things, but you don't need to know it all. You just need to do it, feel it, experience it in your glucose monitor, experience it in your Aura ring that's on airplane mode, I hope, and experience it in your lab test that you do once a year. Experience it in the way you feel and wake up and you're ready for the day. And then you'll, if you are curious, then you can go into the detail. And I always say, examine the science for yourself. Come to these conclusions yourself. Please don't trust me. You know, I'm someone who lives it, I'm someone who teaches it, I'm someone who's seen it, but you may be a situation that there's complex things in your environment. It may not work as perfectly for you. That's when you need a good diagnostician. That's when you need a building biologist or a really good specialist, or someone who can identify that one root lever, your weakest link. And when you get your weakest link, we can nurture that and the whole system improves.
Absolutely. I think it's a different approach to health too, because a lot of us in our heads, we think about the treating of a specific disease or presentation or health condition, and that each of these conditions will have a separate treatment associated with it. And, you know, again, we try and overcomplicate it in that way. But what you're saying here is, let's just get the body as healthy and as connected and as strong as possible, and that's the health's going to take care of itself.
And that's beautiful, because the two things I'll say on that is, number one is the human living system is a hydrogen-based, you know, carbon-based semiconductive system, but it's mostly water. 99 out of every 100 molecules is H2O water. And this water is the foundation of life. And if you don't understand water, you won't understand a disease and an expression. So what makes the water? Mitochondria make about 8 to 10 liters per day in your body. And we are incredible recyclers of this water and imprinting information into this water and energy all the time. So what energy and information are you putting in your water? That is then creating the proteins, everything that has structure in your body, all the hormones, all the neurotransmitters, all the biochemistry, all the fascia, the muscle tissue, the actin, myosin, all of these things, the collagen, the keratin, the melanin, it's all informed by the energy and information buried in your water and the signals that your mitochondria are receiving. And that right there is the foundations of everything. And the second I'll mention is all these different diseases, and I've worked with over 1,000 patients, and that you'd be hard pressed to find a major category of disease I haven't seen and haven't helped people move through the symptomology and ignore the symptoms and deal with the foundations, and suddenly the symptoms start to vanish, is that these are all epigenetic expressions of water, mitochondrial, electrical, and light dysfunction at a very deep level. Whatever your weakest link is, if it's the eyes and the brain, like it is for me, that's where I'm going to start to see fatigue at the end of the day. That's when I take too many flights. I'm going to start to see my floaters increase in my eyes. I'm going to start to see watering of my eyes. I'm going to start to see things. If yours is your knee or your hip, or it could be your kidneys or your bowel or your prostate or your breasts, it could be whatever it is. This is where you're going to start to see your system and your coherence break down. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, for humans, we store our mitochondrial density in our brains and our heart, and therefore we start to see brain and eyes part of the brain, it's the front side of the brain, and heart issues hit us first. because these areas of the body contain the most amount of mitochondria, meaning they need the most water and they need the most energy. And this is where we start to see most people's weakest links. So hence strokes, cardiovascular disease, neurodegeneration, Alzheimer's, dementias, all these types of things are the biggest killers of humans. That's where we store our longevity. That's where we get killed. So if you look at gorillas store their mitochondrial density in their muscular tissue. So the biggest, strongest gorilla is the one that's going to live the longest. Whereas for humans, it's the biggest, strongest heart and brain. And if you're heart-led and your brain's in heart-brain coherence, that's where you're going to live the longest. It's not where we store them in the muscle tissue. Muscle tissue helps, but you can overdo that and steal the energy from your brain and your heart and take away from your longevity. So we don't encourage that. So when you identify what's in your system, you'll start to move this, as Jackie said, this paradigm away where you've been given a label and you've been told it's a set of symptoms and it's this and that. And you'll start to come back to, okay, where is my chain link broken? How do I address the mitochondria in that area of the body or in the system? Because you add energy to the system, it'll distribute it beautifully. And how do I, but first, and this is the most important thing, the first thing you do is you alleviate the toxicity, the xenoestrogens, the chemicals, the electromagnetic field exposures, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, 5G, all these things. You alleviate the electric fields off the lamp or your phone charger next to your head in bed. You alleviate the artificial blue LED lighting around you. Once you take the pressure off the nervous system and the endocrine system and the blood, now you can start adding energy to the system because it's ready. So that when the system's stressed, don't go and do cold therapy. Don't go and do sauna. Don't go and get lots of sunlight. Don't go and add a new PEMF mat that you've got off the internet or whatever. Don't add stem cells or peptides or any, like these are things that come later if you're going to do them at all, which you don't even have to do them. You just, if you want to get that extra 1%, maybe you can do some of them, but alleviate the pressure off, add energy to the system, and you'll build from the most deepest nourishing parts of your inner nature all the way out to your physical expression.
That's such an important point because I think a lot of us, we look at adding stressful strategies to our routine, like you said, cold therapy or intense exercise or something that is stressing an already stressed system, and then wondering why we feel worse or, you know, it's not working the way that we thought it would. And it's not that those strategies are bad, but it's just that we don't have the capacity to build with those strategies at that point.
Your system's locked in the primitive reflex system. It's oversympathetic. You're already not sleeping. Why do you think doing a training for a marathon would be a good thing to do? It's insane.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, you were talking before, we get really stuck on DNA and genetics. And, you know, you were saying everyone's kind of got their weakest link, you know, that might be the bit that goes first. But we're a bit focused on DNA and genetics being the cause of that, when really that's just sort of the, okay, what's our weakest link? And that might be different between people. But at the end of the day, it's just simply that lack of health or vitality that's going to cause that weakest link to kind of break.
100%. And, you know, this is a really good point you bring up, and I won't go into too much detail because we could for a while, but the most important aspect of this is your DNA is a library, your mitochondria and epigenome read the books. So the books can stay on the shelf. They don't have to be read. And I'm someone who has a decent amount of, I've got an MTHFR mutation. I've got, you know, a bunch of other metabolic mutations. I've got a retinoblastoma gene mutation. I've got a few different things. I'm someone who I've shown that I can make my genome, my DNA, nuclear genome quiescent. I can quiet those mutations. They don't have to express. They don't have to be in control of my life. When your mitochondrial genome, your second genome, the most important one, when that's in control and your engines are humming beautifully because they're getting the right signals, all those mutations that all those people that say your DNA dictates your life and they're the cause of XYZ, they become obsolete. You don't have to turn those on. You can make your own proteins, and over generations, you can rewrite that DNA. And so if your mitochondria are functioning well, that's what you need to focus on. And that's how you can control your destiny. Just because your parents had Alzheimer's, just because your parents had type 1 diabetes, just because they've had all these types of conditions, that does not have to be your story. I'm sorry, you got to take radical responsibility for your health. I'm sorry, it's tough. I know it's really difficult. I caused my own cancer with my lifestyle and my environment. It wasn't my parents that gave me the mutation. Sure, they set me up for it, but something happened where I caused my second cancer. Now, the first one, I've got my own theories, but so you're absolutely in control of how you express your DNA, and that's really important for people to know.
Absolutely. There's a good saying I heard ages ago. I think it was, the environment loads the gun, but what is it? Your genetics load the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger.
Totally, 100%. And we're seeing that with a lot of different people, these days. And just it's also important to understand that, like, type 1 diabetes, a good example, or Alzheimer's, good examples. The reason I chose those is because they're actually advantageous if you live far from the equator. So if you're in southern Tasmania or in southern New Zealand, or you're in in southern Argentina, or right at the top of the world, then these mutations will actually allow you to conserve more nutrients. So Alzheimer's ones allow you to utilize nutrients a lot more efficiently than people who don't have the Alzheimer's DNA mutations. Type 1 diabetes, it means that you can raise the amount and deal with more glucose in your blood, and that actually acts as an antifreeze, so that when you're in a really cold environment, your blood doesn't freeze as quickly. So these have survival advantages, and they're built into our DNA through generations, through lineage, to actually serve us, to help us survive more and more. And believe it or not, even the epigenetic mitochondrial diseases, even the metabolic autoimmune conditions and fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue and all these things, they're wisdom built into the system trying to survive. If you didn't get chronic fatigue, you'd have a heart attack straight away. So it slows you down, and it extends your longevity. So maybe you have a heart attack in 15 years instead of right now. So all these things are train stops. They're wisdom of the body. They're not problems. You just have to decode what they're trying to tell you, and then you can go and slowly build that resilience back into the system and live however long you want to, but ideally with a good quality of life.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to segue a little bit here into your work now and what you're doing. You do a bit of work with Nick, who I interviewed not too long ago too, and you're working on a company called Biotra. Can you tell me about that?
Absolutely. So Biotra is transforming your life and your biology through a simple approach to healthy living in a modern world. And what Nick and Ryan and I have done, we've come together from quite separate silos in the health space, me being biophysics, Nick being biomechanics, and Ryan being the psychospiritual aspects, psychotherapy side. And we've merged them together into a total health solution for people that is simple and straightforward, tested by all of us, and it functionally makes sense because where biophysics at the deep subcellular ultra reductionist level, it meets the psychospiritual oneness soul journey connection inner work right at the other side. And what connects the physical and that aspect is the biomechanics, the movement of fluid and air spaces in the way we move through the world. So when we connect all of that together, we've created a system that's built, and it's the only one so far that's integrated all these three aspects and also applied it to a modern built indoor living EMF loaded artificially lit world loaded with chemicals. And we've been able to explain how it's so important to do this particular practice in your life, but really and we've created a book that we wrote and we published earlier this year in May, and it's sort of the first go-to for people to understand the science and the importance of what's built underneath the methodology. But the retreats that we host and the events that we host lay out the actual simple 30-minute to 70-minute practice that incorporates all of these aspects into a very simple practice for your life. And it's also for very low resourced people as well. So it can be done. The only equipment you ever need is a couple $100 worth of equipment, and you can do it anywhere at any time with anywhere in the world. And it's very, very accessible to people. So it's a structured 9-step process with 6 steps as the core, and then 3 is optional. And you go through, a few minutes of each of these sections, and they're structured in a beautifully coherent way so that they activate the body in the right sequence with the right context, so that you can develop a really deep framework that allows you to, that informs the rest of your life. It informs the way you move through life, the way you eat, the way you exercise, the way you do your work, everything. So it takes you back to that inner blueprint that you came into this world with. And yeah, Nick's a genius from a physical and neuroimmunological standpoint. And when I first met him, I heard some things through the grapevine, but when you meet someone like that, you just know that there has to be something that you give as a gift to the world, to be able to pull what was relegated to academia, this deep level of science, and you have to give that to people because they deserve to know. And we were just lucky enough to connect on these particular aspects. And Ryan as well. So much is lost to woo-woo or mysticism or everything in the spiritual realm, and the guru sort of realm, and this ascension and elevation. We go, that's too hard. It's not practical. I'm struggling to pay my bills, and I got to work, and I'm not sleeping well. So why would I, meditate or whatever? And to be able to demystify such a lost world in a way, to actually bring it to being very practical and integrating that into something that's very rational and in many ways logical as well, was also a beautiful gift to bring this together. So the 3 of us got together, and now this is our offer of service to humanity, to share this in a simple way.
Yeah, beautiful. What's your book called?
It's called Biotra, an approach to healthy living in a modern world. So
beautiful. And where can people get that?
They can get it on Amazon. It's available there. We hope to post it somewhere else at some point very soon. It's in Barnes and Noble, and it's in a couple other spaces, but Amazon tends to be the easiest way globally for people to get it at this stage. And we'll be offering it in various clinics, and we've got some gymnasiums and other people signed up. So there'll be physical books, around everywhere. We sell it in Kindle as well as physical book, but we recommend the physical book because there's some really, really beautiful diagrams, and it goes so well. You can open it and you can do your exercise with the pictures open, and you can copy things and sketch on it. And I kind of like that sort of aspect of it. So I encourage you to get the physical book if you can.
Yeah, awesome. So it's the book, and does that explain these processes as well through the book, plus a bit of the theory and the background and how it's all kind of working?
100%. So I was lucky enough to get 5 chapters. I think Nick got 3 and Ryan got 2. So there's a decent amount of biophysics in there. Now this biophysics that's in there, it's a little bit deeper than what I've gotten into here, but it's actually a lot more simple and straightforward. The references there's about 150 references. They're all mine, because people need to know the science of the biophysics, because it's the most fringe. In a way, it's not sort of been really considered, and not needed to be considered, because of we used to live with nature and now we don't. So I talk about cold, I talk about light, I talk about red light, I talk about heat, I talk about grounding, I talk about all the biophysical concepts around those and why they work, all the mechanisms we know so far. There's still more to learn, and we will update the book as we keep learning things, but it really simplifies all these really complex concepts into very easily digestible and value chunked sections. It took us about 3 years to write this book, and we did it all before AI, I'm proud to say. So there was no AI research, there was no AI writing. It was all very much done from our own lived experience, our research that we'd done ourselves, the books that we'd read, and the patients that we'd worked with. So it's all very real.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. It's so obvious when you say it, and I find this when you come across a concept that's just true, it just kind of speaks to you at a different level, because it's like, we look at the biology in terms of health, but why don't we look at the physics? We look at the physics in terms of every other physical concept, and when we're creating things and inventing things and making technology, we're looking at the physics, but we don't look at the physics in terms of our own physical bodies, which is crazy. It seems so obvious when you start to think about it.
100%. And, it's a lost art, I think, because physicists used to be, there was Einstein and, Feynman and some of these great guys, Paul Dirac, James Clerk Maxwell, these guys are late 1800s, early 1900s. We had unbelievable breakthroughs in quantum mechanics, all these different things that we started, understanding so much more about the world. And then it somewhat just stalled. The Second World War happened, and then I don't know, it just sort of stalled, and not a lot of people picked it up. But now we're starting to realize, one example of this, and look, is pharmaceutical industry back in the early 1900s buried so much of this research. So a lot of what we are bringing to the forefront is not new. It's old. It's very old, and it was just buried, and it's been re-updated and reapplied, and it works again. And the world seems to be ready for this. But the most fascinating thing that my friend Jerry Pollack told me was, he worked in physiotherapy and in muscular systems, musculoskeletal system science for a long time, and they never talked about water. And about 70 to 80% of the muscle is water. And you'd think, oh, it's like the junk DNA, like it's most of the DNA, it's just useless, is it? No, the water is this new aquaphotomic science, meaning light and water interacting, is starting to become the foundation of the health paradigm. So, this stuff has been around for a long time, and it's been ignored, and I'm not sure why, but it's so blaringly obvious that it's really, any health practitioners out there, anyone out there who's got a chronic disease or looking to optimize their health or their performance, if you're an athlete, anyone, look at the water. Look at how the water's behaving in that part of your body that you're struggling in. Look at why it's behaving that way, and look at your mitochondria and how they're producing the water. That's it. Like that's a great starting point for discovering what you need to do next.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you also run retreats with Biotra?
Yeah, 100%. So we've done 5 retreats so far over the last 4 years. And the next one's in November. It's in the Solomon Islands. We always love going there. It's a very special place because it has the light, water, and magnetism aspects of biophysics. So the context is perfection. Population density is extraordinarily low, so there's no, technology issues that we have to really deal with. And so because of that, it's got the ocean right there, and then because of that, all you have to do is focus on a lot of the biomechanical and psychospiritual aspects, and the psychospiritual aspect becomes so much easier when you're in that context. So you're really just focusing on the biomechanical, and this is what life was designed to do. And that's why I don't necessarily think most people need to go into, the biophysics depth that I have, because live with nature. It's there. It doesn't make mistakes, but it's so difficult in our everyday lives to live that, and that's why it's become important. So the retreats are a really fun experience for the participants, especially, and for us, obviously, too. But it's where you go a deep dive, and it's 7 days. And we organize the airfares, we organize the lodging, the food, everything's circadian, the lights are perfection, the EMFs are low in the bedrooms. We have a beautiful routine of waking up just pre-sunrise every day, and we do our introspective practice together, and it's exceptional to see the transformations of people throughout. And you also get one-on-one time with Nick, Ryan, and I And we, as you can probably tell, I love talking, I love sharing. And, you get to ask all of your little itty bitty questions that you never get to ask anyone, that are, deep down inside. And that gives me an insight into your brain and how you're thinking and how your curiosity is. And the better your questions, the better my answers will be. So it's a beautiful opportunity for people who want to deep dive, for new people who want to shortcut the process, and for, practitioners and other people who want to, take it to the next level. It's actually catered for everybody. So it's beautiful.
Yeah, awesome. So if we want to find out a bit more about this, where can we go?
Yeah, biotra.com.au, biotra.com.au. Everything's there. We have foundational courses as well, 9 planet modules, that if you just want to take the first step, it's pretty low barrier to entry just to get on some of those. And then obviously you can email us with any questions, at support@biotra.com.au. And check out the retreat. We've got pictures and testimonials and things from the last one. So if you're interested in the next one, we're starting to plan. I'm over in the US, so we're starting to plan one down in Mexico, where I used to live. And we've got a beautiful venue down there for 15 people we can host. It's right on the beach. And I've already got some amazing drivers and trips planned to the local cenotes, and some of the other beautiful natural attractions that are there. So keep an eye out for that. Go jump on the page, and we've got Instagram, we've got Facebook, and so you can always jump on there for little updates that we all, each 3 of us, do every now and then as well.
Yeah, amazing. Oh, that sounds great. That's awesome. And you've got another business too, Nathan. So nathansiles.com is sort of your central place that people can go. And what else are you working on in that?
Yeah, so in the ecosystem that fits everything is BioSpectral Systems. So this is my new company that I've created off the back of recognizing that the last 30 years, everything's gone haywire in our biology, and reintroducing people to a circadian lifestyle and biophysics supported environment, is sometimes not going to get people solutions in a week like they want. So we've had to create some products in order to help people where they're at right now, so they can start to make changes. The first product we created was these blue light blocking glasses that we've got. We've got 6 or 7 different frame styles for kids, for adults. We've got prescription lenses. They actually contain in monomer melanin pigmentation in the lens. It's within the actual lens, and it's melanin because our eyes use melanin in our irises and our retinas to actually block and filter light as well. So we're using a material that nature has already designed. So it's designed by nature, it's backed by science, and it's used by us in these lenses. And we're finding the spectral curve is unbelievable. It's better than anything else that we've ever seen, with the dyes and the tints and all these dips and all these things that most of the other blue blocking companies do use. So we've got a patent on it, and it's exceptional. So you'd be good to try some of those out on biospectralsystems.com. And then we've got full spectrum light bulbs, which we've introduced. And as you would imagine, we've got more than 50%. We've got 70% infrared in those light bulbs. And the reason we've done that is because, Jackie, it's good for you as well, because Reflecting Health is actually a beautiful name. Because when you're in nature, the green spaces around you, those green chlorophyll leaves and grass, actually reflects infrared light back to the body. So the more time you spend in green spaces, you're actually getting a huge dose of infrared light therapy. It is your infrared sauna going through a walk through the park. And it's about 70% when you're in a green space, the whole spectrum you're getting. So that's why we put that in the light bulb. We wanted to simulate you walking through a green space. So it has those 7 colors of the rainbow, but it also has that beautiful infrared. And so hopefully what we're trying to do here is, if you fit out your house with these bulbs, you don't get a benefit from your red light therapy panel anymore. So that $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, thing that you're plugging in, introducing all these extra flicker and electric fields and dirty electricity and, whatever into your house, as well as the narrow spectrum of 3 or 4 nanometer wavelengths, we're now introducing over 2,000 wavelengths from the light above you, just like the sun does, come from the same source, and it's spread and bounced and scattered off all of your walls. And yes, it's a bit lower of a power density, but that's the way nature designed it. So we started with the bulbs as well, and they're coming very, very soon to Australia. And then we've got grounding sheets done properly, and we'll talk about that as we keep going with finalizing some studies on that so we can present it to the world. And we've got anti-radiation headsets and a bunch of other things. So, you know, these are just some bare essentials that people could have, and we try to keep the price as cost prohibitive as possible, so we can make it so it's easy accessible for people, so that they can add these couple little things to their little foundational health kit, and they can take those wherever they travel, wherever they go, and then not use them as a substitute for nature, but use them when you cannot choose nature.
Perfect. Is that one of the light bulbs you've got on now, the very red color?
Absolutely. Yep.
The anti-radiation headsets, are they like a listening, like a headphone? Oh no.
Yeah, so they're headphones. They're over the ears.
Yeah.
And they're an air tube technology. So the speaker is down right by the clavicle sort of area, and it's actually shooting the sound through the air tube into the actual earpiece, and it's going in there, and it's noise cancelling as well. So, you know, you'll have this beautiful auditory experience. And look, the biggest reason we wanted to do this is, once again, the brain being the most important. We see so many children using Bluetooth headsets, and these Bluetooth headsets are so horrible when you start to use a proper radio frequency meter like a Safe and Sound Pro 2 or, you know, an RF Explorer spectrum analyzer. You start to use these types of devices that are even building biologists don't really use. You start to see frequencies and harmonics that are absolutely destroying the brain. And this is a discussion for a whole nother day, but, you know, the brain really oscillates and operates between about 2 hertz, 2 cycles per second, all the way up to about 40 cycles per second when you're in full flow state, like it's functioning really high level. But it really oscillates right around that 7.83 hertz, that Schumann resonance, or 10 hertz. That's your calm, nice, regulated, you know, state. When you use the Bluetooth headsets, you have 2.4 billion cycles per second pulsing your inner ear right in the cochlea there, where it's transmitting these electrical signals through bone conduction through into the brain. And it's causing the brain to get overexcited. When it gets overexcited, it releases calcium at the wrong time, it depletes your magnesium at the wrong time, it destroys neurotransmission, it destroys melanin, it degrades that whole system. And you're unable to, that's how tinnitus starts to kick off. You know, you start to have these issues where you're hearing phantom sounds, and, you know, it's really brain damage. And so when you can substitute anything like that, not just for wired, because wired and the next best, but you're still with that, you've got a copper wire going into the ear. So you've got if your phone's emitting radio frequency, you've got a jump conduction effect of that radio frequency going up the wire, getting into the brain as well. But you've also got an electric field that's going into the brain. So once again, it's another field that's pressing voltage pressure onto the brain, and it's causing electrical disruption. And we're an electrical system. So, you know, we wanted to get rid of that, keep all those metal parts and all of that type of radiation away from the brain, so that the kids' brains can myelinate and they can develop well. And I say kids because it's just that much more important for their brain, because it hasn't fully developed its shielding of myelin sheaths and all of the melanin it needs to build up in order to help shield it. So, you know, the headsets cover the eye, protect the eyes, protect the head, protect the brain, use the light bulb that protects the skin and the eyes. So we're hoping to keep the brain as healthy, the mitochondria as healthy as possible.
I love that. That's such a good solution, because, yeah, I agree. Headphones are shocking, but there's no real alternative out there for people to use. Yeah, beautiful. Is there any last, anything else you want to share today while we're here?
The one thing I'd say is you can always heal. So don't lose faith in your body. I think that's really important, and that's built into Biotra. It's built into what we do as our DNA. you're not making a mistake. Your body is not making a mistake. It's not faulting you. It's not the problem. You're not the problem. The environment in which made you sick, you cannot get well in that environment. So you have to change your life. And if you're willing to change your life, and it sounds like a daunting concept, but some of these simple strategies that I've shared with you today and that Jackie's really resonated with at a logical, simple level, some of these changes can totally transform your body so that it can heal, and that regeneration can outpace that damage. So if you're in any way curious, do check out Biotra. Do check out biotra.com.au, because it really is the center point of how you can begin to live a healthy life in a modern world. And don't ever feel like you can't reach out to us, ask questions, interact. We're here, we're human. We're never going to use AI or any of these things to replace us. We're always going to be direct line of contact with people. We want to build community. We need each other, and we're here to connect. We're here to grow together. So if you need any more information on this, there's so much out there, but we've tried to distill the most important things into the book and the courses and the retreat. So I really encourage you to go and venture through that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nathan. I have really enjoyed this conversation. It's been a wonderful introduction to biophysics. I think the way you've explained it and broken it down, you've made it completely accessible and understandable, and it's given me a lot to go on and to look at and to research. It's an absolutely fascinating area, and I hope that it just keeps building and building, and as people start to learn more and more about it.
Yeah, we've got the momentum now. People are waking up. People are starting to do this. And 10 years ago when I had my red lights on, people thought it was, something different. But now it's starting to become a lot more accepted. So there is a huge tidal wave coming of a decentralized healthcare system where people are empowered and you're able to make good choices for yourself. So you're on the forefront. You listening can be part of this wave. We want you to be a part of this. Share it with your loved ones, share it with people that you care about, share it with someone who might want to listen to this, because Jackie's been able to bring some really powerful people, Nick and then and I'm sure she's got many others planned to really help everyone where they're at. So yeah, really excited for you to be a part of this.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jackie.